If we set aside Christian doctrine, what is the moral difference between eating a chicken and a human? None. Those weren't the ravings of a madman in a padded cell. They were the cold, distilled philosophy of Kajetan Poznański. On February 27, 2016, this soft-spoken librarian sat across from detectives and calmly deconstructed the mechanics of his own brutality. He had just been extradited from the island of Malta, ending one of the most intense and complex international manhunts in modern European history. This is a descent into a mind that traded literature for blood. You are watching the Eastern Bloc. Katarzyna was 30 years old, a brilliant linguist rebuilding her life in Warsaw after a failed marriage. On February 3, 2016, her schedule was packed. She had 3 students lined up for private Italian lessons. 2 were regulars. 1 was a stranger, a man calling himself Antoni Sluminski. Katarzyna was a veteran traveler. She had lived in Italy and was planning to fly to Bologna that very afternoon to see her partner, Manuel. But she was feeling physically weak, struggling with chronic joint pain. Because of this, she broke her golden rule. Instead of traveling to the student, she invited this Antoni to her private apartment at Skierniewice 13. Her flight from Modlin Airport was set for 3:50 p.m. Time was tight, but she didn't want to cancel. Antoni arrived exactly on time. He was polite, educated, the perfect student. She offered him tea. As the water began to boil, he took off his coat. When she turned her back to hang it up, the librarian's mask fell. 2 powerful stabs pierced her neck. It was fast. It was surgical. Kajetan watched her bleed out on the floor, fulfilling a ritual he had rehearsed in his mind for years. At 5 p.m., her roommate returned. He noticed the first red flag. The front door was unlocked. Inside, he found a smeared red stain on the tiles, a failed attempt to scrub away the evidence. Katarzyna's laptop and phone were still there. In the bathroom, a wet sponge and towel sat in the washing machine. In the roommate's room, the blinds had been drawn shut. She was gone. Her backpack was gone. While the family desperately searched for her, smoke began to billow from an apartment block at Potocka 60 in the Jolie Bars district. Firefighters broke down the door to apartment 24. The fire was small, but the discovery was monumental. In the center of the room lay a charred, fetal shape wrapped in melted plastic and a travel bag. The police report is chilling. The body was decapitated. The head had been stuffed into a backpack found nearby. A 9-inch knife, stained deep red, lay on the floor. The victim was logged as Person N, unknown. Detectives soon realized the killer hadn't just fled, he had stayed. At the original crime scene on Skierniewice Street, they found bare footprints in the shower. After slaughtering Katarzyna, Kajetan Poznański had calmly washed her blood off his body before taking a taxi across the city with her remains in a suitcase. Katarzyna had no enemies. She practiced yoga, loved art, and stayed away from trouble. But trouble had a name, and as the police checked the registry for the burning apartment at Potocka Street, one name stood out among the 3 roommates: Kajetan Poznański. Kajetan chose Katarzyna almost by chance. By then, he had already decided he was going to kill someone. He had been fantasizing about it for years. At the time, he was working at a public library in Warsaw's Wola district. His colleagues described him as quiet, almost invisible. He avoided social contact and was often seen as rude. He never said good morning or goodbye. He was highly intelligent, deeply read, and obsessed with ancient history. In the library, he was responsible for coordinating cultural events. There were virtually no complaints against him. But while he was shelving books, he was hunting. He found Katarzyna on a tutoring website. He specifically chose her for one chilling reason. Her profile didn't have a photo. "I chose her because I didn't want to know what she looked like," he later told prosecutors. "I didn't want this to be about sex. This was something else." He had been planning the murder for 2 months. His first intended victim was actually his own roommate, but he deemed it too risky. He didn't want a random street mugging. He wanted to study the act of dying. The night before the murder, he stood outside her apartment building, watching, analyzing the exits, calculating his escape. The next morning, his ultimate test began. In his confession, his voice remained eerily flat. "I went to work at 10 a.m. Then I left, telling my boss I had library business to attend to. I went to her flat. 'Good morning,' I said. I introduced myself as Antoni. She asked what I'd like to drink. I said tea. We sat across from each other at the table. We started reading in Italian. Tick-tock. The tension was rising. I knew I couldn't wait until the end of the lesson. The water boiled. I followed her into the kitchen. I was still wearing my coat. She offered to hang it up for me. As she reached for it, I struck her with the knife. Before this, I had killed a chicken. This was a little different." Kajetan aimed directly for the carotid artery. He said his imagination simply suggested it. The plan, he calmly explained to the prosecutors, was to cut the body in half and transport it in 2 trips. But that was stupid of me. I didn't account for just how much blood there is in a human body. The murder happened in the hallway, but the decapitation took place in the bedroom. To prepare, the librarian had been practicing with a saw on animal bones, testing the resistance of marrow and cartilage. The prosecutor asked, "Did the suspect consume any part of the victim?" "I did not proceed to consume the victim," Kajetan replied, almost regretfully, "because everything fell apart." When pressed on what he intended to eat, his answer was clinical. "I wanted to try the kidney or the liver. They are healthy organs. They are strong because they have so much work to do, just like the heart or the brain." Kajetan's god was Hannibal Lecter. He lived and breathed the world of Thomas Harris. Back in 2013, while working at the library, he actually proposed a series of lectures. Famous gourmets between Rome and Hannibal Lecter and the morality of a carnivore, a word on cannibalism. His writings were filled with narcotic visions. In his story, A Certain Tuesday, he wrote, "The savages were too bulky to be swift. I escaped them, or so I thought. I listen. Silence. I think it's over. I am safe. Then suddenly, a sword flies from the right. I lunge aside, but the blade managed to cut my arm. I roared in searing pain, a powerful dose of adrenaline. I sliced the brute's legs in half. The upper, larger part of the divide, that which was still called a person, slid down the freshly opened top of the knees." Kajetan's preparations were industrial. He didn't just buy a knife. He bought a meat grinder. He had a specific plan for what would remain after his feast. He intended to transport her remains to the Campinos forest to burn them. He even purchased a stun gun, which ultimately turned out to be useless. He told the prosecutor, "Unless you believe in God, a human life is worth no more than a mosquito's. What is the substantial difference between you and the pig we butcher to eat?" And poor Kasia is dead, but reality is messier than philosophy. Kajetan had planned to cut her up in a bathtub, only to find she only had a shower. Time was running out. He decapitated her, stuffed the body into a bag, and began a frantic cleanup. He scrubbed the floor with towels, but the blood only smeared. He threw the soaked rags into the washing machine and fled, leaving the front door wide open. In his rush, he placed one of the heavy bags in the elevator and sent it down alone. A neighbor saw the leaking bag and froze in fear. Then she heard rapid footsteps. Poznański sprinting down, shouting, "The bag! The bag!" He grabbed it and hailed a taxi to Potocka 60. The driver, Piotr N., helped him load the luggage. It was heavy, and it was warm, Piotr recalled. I asked why. He said, "It's a wild boar, just joking about the boar." He put on black leather gloves just to load the bags. When we arrived, I saw a dark red stain spreading across the bag. I asked again what was in there. He just said, "Like I told you, it's a wild boar." At his own apartment, Kajetan tried to burn the remains using fire starter fluid, but the body didn't ignite as he hoped. Between 2 and 3 p.m., he tried to burn her phone, SIM cards, and laptop. As smoke filled the room, he simply walked out. Neighbors called the fire department. What followed was a masterclass in sociopathic calm. Kajetan went straight to a bank and took out a loan for 25,000 zloty, about $6,000. He was perfectly composed. With the cash, he went to the central railway station. At 4 p.m., he boarded a train to Poznan. There, he bought new clothes, glasses, and a tablet. When a ticket clerk asked if he was traveling alone, Kajetan snapped, "What do you care? Why are you interested?" The clerk said he seemed hostile, set against other human beings. From Poland, he crossed into Germany, Frankfurt, Berlin, Munich, then Italy, Naples, Sicily, finally a ferry to Malta. His digital footprint was his undoing. He used his tablet to check Polish news sites to see his own face. By February 10th, his passport was revoked. On February 17th, 2 weeks after the murder, he went to the Polish consulate in Valletta, claiming he had lost his passport. He was recognized instantly at a bus stop by plainclothes officers. He didn't fight. He was simply surprised. On February 26th, the Polish military dispatched a Casa C-295 to extradite him. On board, he was initially calm, and officers removed his handcuffs. But as the plane began its descent into Warsaw, Kajetan snapped. "I heard a scream," one officer testified. Kajetan lunged at one of our younger officers, Jakub. He fought like a wild animal. Even after we cuffed him, he tried to bite us. The officers pinned him to the floor, shackled his ankles, and forced a specialized riot helmet onto him. Throughout the struggle, Kajetan remained eerily silent. When asked why, he said, "I planned to overpower all of them, grab a parachute, and jump out of the plane." He genuinely believed it was a good plan. On February 27th, in Warsaw, the interrogation finally began. It was the beginning of unraveling a personality that was a labyrinth of ancient myths, Nietzschean philosophy, and cold-blooded murder. The librarian's journey was over. The trial of the Polish Hannibal was just beginning. Thank you for joining us in the Eastern Bloc. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the shadows of history.